A shocking scandal has erupted after Rampage Jackson's son unleashed a brutal beatdown that the internet is calling one of the ugliest moments in combat sports. Some are saying it was staged, others claim it was attempted murder, and the footage has sparked outrage worldwide. But just when the dust began to settle, Conor McGregor broke his silence, and what he said has left the MMA world divided. In this video, we'll uncover every detail of Rampage Jackson's downfall, the backlash, the legal fallout, and the dark truth McGregor revealed that changes everything. The story began as what many thought was just another wrestling event. Loud entrances, flashy moves, and theatrics meant to entertain the crowd. Rampage Jackson, the son of former UFC legend Rampage Jackson, was in the spotlight, trying to carve out his own identity. For years, Raja had lived in the long shadow of his father, chasing relevance through streaming, appearances, and a brief flirtation with MMA. But this night was supposed to be different. Instead, it became a nightmare that spread like wildfire across the internet. During the match, Raja delivered what at first appeared to be a standard wrestling slam on an opponent known as Psycho Stu. But what happened next horrified fans. Instead of stopping when the move was complete, Raja unleashed a barrage of punches. Over 20 strikes on an already unconscious opponent. The crowd's cheers turned to stunned silence, and the video clips show the referee frozen, unsure of whether to intervene. Some believed it was part of the script, but then came the aftermath. Reports confirmed that Psycho Stu had been left badly injured, unresponsive for several minutes, and rushed to the hospital. Almost immediately, the footage flooded social media platforms. Viewers dissected every frame, arguing whether the violence was planned or if Raja had simply snapped. Some slowed down the video and pointed to a moment just before the slam where Psycho Stu seemed to whisper something to the referee, fueling theories that they were setting up a storyline. But the viciousness of Raja's attack, the refusal to stop even after his opponent was clearly knocked out, made the majority believe this wasn't entertainment, it was a meltdown. For Raja, the stakes couldn't have been higher. He had often said publicly that he wanted to make a name for himself outside of his father's legacy, but instead of glory, he now had infamy. His outburst wasn't just reckless, it was career-destroying. Fans didn't see the hungry young fighter he wanted to be. They saw the son of a legend throwing his future away in one catastrophic moment. The headlines the next morning said it all. Rampage Jackson's son, accused of attempted murder in wrestling ring. The MMA and wrestling worlds, often at odds, were united in outrage, and the scandal had only just begun. The reaction was immediate and vicious. Within hours, fighters, coaches, streamers, and fans around the globe weighed in, and almost no one came to Raja's defense. The attack was labeled reckless, dangerous, and inexcusable. Derek Brunson called it out of line and said Raja had to face big boy consequences. Ryan Garcia went further, writing that Raja needs to go to prison, calling the beating the worst thing I've seen in a long time. Across TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, influencers replayed the footage frame by frame, dissecting every punch, every mistake, every sign of lost control. One of the loudest criticisms wasn't even directed at Raja, but at the referee. Fans accused him of standing by and watching an unconscious man get pummeled. "You just sat there while someone's life was on the line," one furious commentator said. "If you wear the shirt, you protect the fighters." End of discussion. Calls to ban the ref were trending alongside hashtags demanding Raja's arrest. But the harshest backlash landed squarely on Raja himself. Critics called him spoiled, fragile, and unprepared for the pressures of combat sports. His live streams resurfaced, where he ranted about being overshadowed by his father, about wanting to be brand rich instead of just living off Rampage's name. Those clips were now reshared as evidence of a young man desperate for attention, spiraling under the weight of expectation. This wasn't about proving himself, one fan wrote. It was about rage, insecurity, and ego. Speculation swirled. Was Raja mentally fit to compete at all? Did he have the discipline or self-control required to follow in Rampage's footsteps? Or was this incident proof that he was never cut out for the fight game? Meanwhile, Rampage himself couldn't escape the firestorm. As the father, he was pulled into the scandal whether he liked it or not. At first, he defended Raja, saying his son had been provoked by a beer can incident backstage. But to many, that excuse only made things worse. This wasn't about a beer can, one MMA veteran said. This was about a man losing control. And just as it looked like the backlash couldn't get any hotter, another voice entered the chaos. A voice so big it shifted the entire conversation. Conor McGregor. For Quentin "Rampage" Jackson, the fallout from his son's actions was immediate and unforgiving. Once hailed as one of the most charismatic and entertaining fighters in MMA history, Rampage suddenly found himself dragged into a scandal he didn't create but couldn't escape. The headlines didn't just say Raja Jackson's violent outburst. They said Rampage Jackson's son. The legendary fighter's name was now permanently tied to his son's reckless attack. At first, Rampage tried to downplay the situation. In an interview streamed just hours after the clip went viral, he mentioned the beer can incident backstage, where Psycho Stu reportedly smashed a can over Raja's head as part of the buildup. Rampage framed it as provocation, suggesting Raja had every right to feel disrespected. But the explanation didn't land the way Rampage hoped. To fans, his words sounded less like a father defending his son, and more like a man making excuses for behavior that crossed the line into criminal. The MMA community, many of whom still hold Rampage in high regard for his Pride days and his UFC title run, were divided. Some sympathized. After all, what father wouldn't stand by his son? But others saw it as enabling. Fighters openly asked whether Rampage should have been the one to pull his son aside years earlier, to warn him about discipline, about humility, about the difference between performance and reality. Rampage knew the pressures of fame, one analyst said. He lived it, but instead of guiding Raja away from the pitfalls, it looks like he let him walk right into them. Even worse, the scandal now cast a shadow over Rampage's legacy. Social media was filled with comments comparing father and son. Rampage, the brash but lovable fighter who still had discipline in the cage, versus Raja, the insecure young man who seemed more concerned with streaming clout than respect. For fans, the contrast was painful. They had cheered Rampage for years, but now every mention of his name came with Raja's disaster attached. And as much as Rampage wanted to protect his son, he couldn't shield him from the storm that was brewing. The calls for arrest were growing louder. Media outlets were circling the story, and lawyers were already speculating about charges. Rampage had fought countless wars inside the cage, but nothing could prepare him for the PR war outside of it. As the footage spread and debates raged online, a strange theory began to take shape. Some fans believed Raja's violent outburst wasn't entirely spontaneous. They pointed to a moment just before the slam. Psycho Stu, battered but standing, appeared to lean toward the referee and whisper something. Was it a signal? A setup for a staged move? For a brief moment, this theory gained traction. Maybe the whole thing was supposed to be scripted, a wrestling-style storyline gone wrong. Supporters of the theory argued that Raja had been trying to blur the line between sports entertainment and MMA realism. In pro wrestling, surprises and worked shoots often create viral moments. Maybe Raja thought he could do the same. Deliver something shocking enough to make headlines, something real enough to separate himself from the rest of the roster. In his own words from a stream days earlier, Raja admitted he wanted to make it real and prove he wasn't just another spoiled fighter's kid. But the setup theory quickly crumbled under closer inspection. Fans rewatched the tape and noticed how Psycho Stu never braced for the barrage of punches, how the referee's hesitation looked less like acting and more like genuine shock. More damning footage surfaced of Raja ranting hours earlier on stream, saying he planned to slam him for real and prove people wrong. That revelation made it harder to defend him. This wasn't improvisation gone bad. This was premeditated violence. And yet, the theory persisted because it highlighted something deeper. Raja didn't understand the world he was stepping into. Wrestling thrives on cooperation, storytelling, and the illusion of violence. Raja treated it as an opportunity for real domination, forgetting or ignoring that his opponent wasn't there to be destroyed. To veterans of the industry, it was a rookie mistake of the highest order. To outsiders, It was simply unforgivable. The more the theory was debated, the more it painted Raja as either incompetent or dangerous. Either he misunderstood the nature of the event entirely, or he knew exactly what he was doing and carried it out anyway. Both options pointed to the same conclusion. Rampage Jackson was not ready, mentally or emotionally, for the world he was trying to break into. And just when the community thought the outrage had peaked, Conor McGregor entered the conversation. His words didn't just fuel the fire, they shifted the entire focus of the scandal. As the days passed, the debate over Rampage Jackson's violent outburst shifted from shock to serious legal discussion. The footage wasn't just viral, it was damning. Clear video evidence showed him lifting Psycho Stu, slamming him violently onto the mat, and then unleashing a flurry of punches while his opponent lay motionless. Viewers counted as many as 22 unanswered strikes to the head. To fans, it looked less like a botched wrestling stunt and more like attempted assault, if not attempted manslaughter. Legal experts weighed in almost immediately. On live streams, podcasts, and sports law blogs, the consensus was clear. The sheer brutality of the footage put law enforcement under pressure to act. One attorney noted, "This isn't about a wrestling match. Once a participant is unconscious, anything that happens after that can legally be classified as battery. The fact that it was in a ring, in front of an audience, doesn't change the law." The police reportedly opened an investigation, fueled by the sheer scale of online outrage. Hashtags calling for Raja's arrest trended across Twitter and TikTok. Comment sections filled with people demanding accountability. "If this happened on the street, he'd already be in handcuffs," one user wrote. "Just because he's Rampage's son doesn't mean he's above the law." Adding to the chaos were contradictory reports about Psycho Stu's condition. Some claimed he had flatlined briefly after the assault and been revived by medics. Others said he was discharged but suffering from memory loss and possible brain trauma. The lack of official statements only heightened speculation. If Stu's injuries were long-term, the charges against Raja could escalate dramatically. Rampage's attempts to defend his son now looked even weaker under the legal spotlight. Saying Raja had been provoked by a beer can to the head didn't matter. In the eyes of the law, retaliation hours later inside a ring wasn't self-defense, it was revenge. Prosecutors, if they pursued the case, would almost certainly argue that Raja had premeditated the attack, given his live stream rants about wanting to make it real. As legal commentators dissected the case, one point kept resurfacing. Raja's actions didn't just risk his career, they risked his freedom. If the LAPD moved forward with charges, he could be facing years behind bars. And with the entire MMA and wrestling community watching, the justice system would feel immense pressure to make an example out of him. But just when the situation seemed darkest, a familiar voice arrived to pour gasoline on the fire. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor has always had a knack for inserting himself into the center of attention, and this scandal was no exception. Late one night, McGregor broke his silence with a string of tweets and Instagram stories that immediately became the new headline. His words didn't just comment on the situation, they reframed it entirely. McGregor wrote, "I've seen worse in Dublin pubs. Rage is one thing, control is another. Raja's no fighter. He's a fool. Fighting is an art. What he did was chaos with no skill. He doesn't carry his father's name, he drags it down." The message was short, sharp, and vintage McGregor, part critique, part insult, part self-promotion. Fans went into a frenzy. Some applauded McGregor for calling out Raja's recklessness and emphasizing discipline. Others accused him of hypocrisy, pointing to his own history of public outbursts, throwing a dolly at a UFC bus, punching a man in an Irish pub, and multiple late-night incidents involving police. Conor talking about control? One fan scoffed, "This is the pot calling the kettle black." But McGregor wasn't done. In a follow-up post, he added, "If Raja wants to be a fighter, he should come train with me. Learn what real violence looks like when it's channeled properly. Learn the difference between showmanship and stupidity. Until then, he's just a kid throwing tantrums in his dad's shadow." The statement was pure McGregor, equal parts scathing critique and subtle flex. He positioned himself as both critic and mentor, the man who could teach Raja what it really means to be a fighter. In doing so, McGregor once again shifted the spotlight from Raja's scandal to his own aura. The MMA world immediately split into two camps. One side argued that McGregor was right, that Raja's meltdown proved he lacked the control and artistry that defines true fighters. The other side laughed at McGregor's audacity, pointing out that he himself was no stranger to scandals that made headlines for all the wrong reason. Either way, the result was clear. McGregor's response became the story. For Raja, the consequences of his actions were already dire. But now, with McGregor weighing in, his scandal had officially gone global. What had started as a viral clip from a wrestling event had turned into a full-blown international debate, with the notorious once again at the center. The moment Conor McGregor's comments hit social media, the entire fight world lit up. Journalists, fighters, fans, and even celebrities outside of combat sports jumped into the debate. It wasn't just about Raja Jackson anymore. It was about whether McGregor was the right man to be delivering judgment. On one side were those who applauded him. Analysts on ESPN praised McGregor for framing the issue in terms of discipline and control, saying his words highlighted the difference between professional fighting and reckless street violence. Conor may have his flaws, one commentator said, but he understands that combat sports are built on respect. Raja's outburst showed none of that. Fighters like Michael Bisping and Daniel Cormier echoed the sentiment, calling Raja's behavior unprofessional and saying McGregor was spot on to condemn it. But just as loud were McGregor's critics. Fans flooded Twitter with reminders of McGregor's own scandals, throwing a dolly at a UFC bus and injuring fighters, sucker punching a man in an Irish pub, multiple arrests, and allegations that still follow him. "This guy is talking about control," one user wrote. "Conor McGregor is literally the poster child for public meltdown." Another fan added, "If Raja is a fool, then Conor is the king of fools. He's just better at spinning it." Even fighters weighed in on the hypocrisy angle. Nate Diaz, McGregor's longtime rival, posted a cryptic tweet that read simply, "Pot, meet kettle." The internet exploded with memes pairing Raja's slam with McGregor's bus incident, pointing out the eerie similarities. Both men lost their cool, both men injured others, and both ended up the target of public outrage. The split reaction revealed something deeper about McGregor's place in the sport. On one hand, he's still the voice people listen to when chaos erupts. On the other, his credibility as a moral authority is almost non-existent. For McGregor, it hardly mattered. He thrives on controversy, and once again, he had turned someone else's scandal into his stage. But there was another effect. By stepping in, McGregor reignited discussion not just about Raja, but about MMA's culture itself, its glorification of violence, its blurred line between entertainment and real combat, and its troubling history of fighters losing control outside the cage. As the dust settled from McGregor's comments, analysts began connecting the dots between Raja Jackson's outburst, Rampage Jackson's legacy, and McGregor's response. This wasn't just one isolated scandal. It was a mirror held up to the entire fight world. First, there was the issue of legacy. Raja Jackson had been trying for years to escape his father's shadow. Growing up as Rampage Jackson's son meant inheriting expectations he couldn't possibly meet. Rampage was beloved for his larger-than-life personality, his knockout power, and his success in Pride and the UFC. Raja, by comparison, was a streamer desperate for validation. The pressure to be somebody wasn't just personal, it was public. That kind of weight can twist a young man, and many believed Raja's violent meltdown was the inevitable result of years of insecurity boiling over. Then there was the ego factor. McGregor's words about rage without control struck a chord because they applied to more than just Raja. They applied to almost every fighter who ever reached the top. Combat sports thrive on ego. It fuels the rivalries, sells the pay-per-views, and draws the fans. But when unchecked, that same ego destroys lives. Rampage himself once admitted to struggles with anger and depression. McGregor has spiraled in his own scandals. Now Raja was the latest example, his ego shattering whatever chance he had at a career. Finally, there was the bigger question. Is the culture of MMA partly to blame? For years, promoters have blurred the line between reality and entertainment, encouraging fighters to provoke, to talk trash, to manufacture chaos. Raja grew up watching that world, seeing his father make headlines for his antics, watching McGregor rise to global stardom by pushing every boundary. When he slammed Psycho Stu into unconsciousness, was it really that different from the spectacles the sport has rewarded for decades? Or was it the inevitable outcome of a system that celebrates violence more than discipline? For fans, these questions were uncomfortable. For fighters, they were even more haunting. Rampage Jackson may never fight again. Rampage's name may forever carry a stain, and McGregor, the man who called it out, remains one of the most controversial figures in sports. In the end, this wasn't just Raja's tragedy. It was a reflection of MMA's darkest truths.